In the spring of the year 2000, a 2-year-old boy in Louisiana began waking up in the middle of the night screaming. His mother would run to his room and find him on his back, kicking and clawing at his covers, as if trying to escape from something. The same nightmare, 4 to 5 times a week. Always the same words. Airplane crash. Plane on fire, little man can't get out. His name was James. His parents were a Protestant couple from Lafayette. His father was a human resources director for an oil company. They did not believe in reincarnation. They had never discussed anything remotely like it with their son, and yet their 2-year-old knew things about World War II fighter aircraft that specialists found difficult to explain. It started with the nightmares. Then came the details. James said his name had been James, a word that a 2-year-old in Louisiana had no reason to know and no way to have encountered. He correctly identified a drop tank on a toy plane, a piece of technical equipment that even many adults would not have recognized. He said he had flown from a boat called He insisted, when his parents questioned the name, that Natoma was American, not Japanese, despite it sounding Japanese to everyone around him. He said he had a friend on the ship named Jack Larson. He said he had been shot down near Iwo Jima. He said his plane had been hit by fire from below. His father, Bruce Lininger, a committed Christian who found the entire situation deeply uncomfortable, began researching. Not because he believed his son, because he needed to prove it was impossible. He found the USS Natoma Bay, a real American escort carrier that served in the Pacific Theater during World War II and that participated in the Iwo Jima operation. He found a pilot named Jack Larson, who had indeed been based on that ship. He identified James Houston Jr., a pilot who had died in March of 1945, shot down near Iwo Jima in a plane that was struck from below and caught fire on impact with the water. The details aligned with a precision that Bruce, who had spent months hoping to find the contradiction that would end his son's memories, could not dismiss. When James later attended a reunion of Natoma Bay veterans, he recognized one of the men by voice alone before seeing his face. The sister of James Houston Jr., a woman named Ann Barron, spoke with the boy at length and became convinced she was speaking with her brother. He demonstrated knowledge of facts about the Houston family that had never been published anywhere, including the existence of a painting their mother had made of Anne as a young girl, which he asked for by name. She sent him her brother's remaining personal artifacts. The case was later published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal by Dr. Jim Tucker of the University of Virginia. Tucker concluded that the correspondence between James's statements and Houston's life was too specific and too accurate to be attributed to coincidence or to information the family could have obtained through normal means. James Lininger is one of more than 2,500 children whose cases have been documented by researchers at the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, one of the longest-running academic investigations into children who report past life memories. And his case, as remarkable as it is not even the most documented one. In the early 1950s in India, a 3-year-old girl named Swarnlata Mishra was traveling with her father past the town of Katni, more than 100 miles from her home. Suddenly, she pointed and asked the driver to turn down a road, saying she wanted to go to her house. Her father, puzzled, noted the comment and moved on. Then Swarnlata began to sing. The songs she sang were unfamiliar to everyone in the family. The dances she performed came from a region of India her family had never visited. She began describing a previous life as a woman named Bia Pathak, a member of a wealthy family in Ketni. She described the layout of the house. She named Bia's children. She described lime kilns on land near the property and a girls' school visible from behind the house. She mentioned a sum of money that had been hidden inside a wall. A researcher named H.N. Banerjee documented Swarnlata's statements in writing before making any attempt to contact the Pathak family. He then traveled to Katni using only her descriptions as a guide. He found the house. He found the family. He found the lime kilns and the school, positioned exactly as she had described. Bia Pathak had died in 1939, leaving behind a husband, 2 sons, and several siblings. When the families finally met, Swarnlata recognized people by sight. She called one man by a childhood nickname that only Bia had used. She identified a brother's limp. The encounter, according according to those present, did not feel like a test. It felt like a reunion. She provided more than 50 specific verifiable facts about B. Apothec's life. Ian Stevenson, the psychiatrist who later investigated the case in depth and included it in his landmark 1966 study, 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation, documented that the statements had been written down before any contact with the family occurred. Several members of the Pathock family, who had held no prior belief in reincarnation, said afterward that Swarnlata had convinced them entirely. The third case unfolded in Oklahoma, beginning in 2004. When Ryan Hammonds was 4 years old, he began waking from nightmares, clutching his chest, saying his heart had exploded when he was in Hollywood. He told his mother, Cindy, a county clerk deputy who had grown up in a Baptist church with no belief in past lives, that he used to be someone else. He said he had danced on Broadway. He said he had worked with famous actors, had become an agent in Hollywood, that the people at his workplace often changed their names. He said he had 5 wives and 3 sons whose names he could not remember, a detail that made him cry. He said his old address had the word rock in it. His mother began keeping a journal of his statements. She started searching through books about old Hollywood, not knowing what she was looking for. One day Ryan pointed to a man in a photograph from a 1932 film called Night After Night, a Mae West picture, and said with certainty that the man in the image was him. The man had no speaking lines in the film. He appeared briefly in a single background scene. He was not famous, and his name was not listed in any readily available credit. Identifying him required weeks of research by a professional film archivist working with a documentary crew. He had danced on Broadway before moving to California. He had worked at an agency where performers routinely changed their names to stage names. His last known address was 825 North Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills. North Roxbury, rock in the name. Dr. Jim Tucker traveled to Oklahoma to investigate. He met Martin's daughter, who confirmed detail after detail that Ryan had stated before Martin's name was ever known. Ryan had mentioned dancing in New York, which Tucker had doubted for an extra, with no lines. But Martin's daughter confirmed her father had been a Broadway dancer before his film work. Ryan had described his workplace as a place where people changed their names, accurate for a talent agency. He had described traveling the world with his wife, which Martin's daughter also confirmed. In one of the most striking moments of the investigation, Ryan had stated that Marty Martin was 61 years old when he died. Martin's official death certificate listed his age as 50, but census records, Tucker Lokay, showed that Martin had been born in 1903, not 1905, as written on the certificate, making him 61 at the time of his death in 1964. 55 specific facts were verified before Marty Martin's identity was established. 3 cases, 3 countries, 3 families with no prior belief in or familiarity with the idea of past lives. 3 sets of specific verifiable information provided by children under 5 years old. Information that, according to the researchers who investigated them, was difficult to explain through coincidence or normal information transfer. These are not the only cases. Has compiled more than 2,500 cases with this same basic structure. Young children between the ages of 2 and 5 who begin spontaneously describing people, places, events, and circumstances that precede their birth. In 1,567 of those cases, the person described in the child's memories was successfully identified through research. Investigators confirmed that the child's statements had been documented in writing before any investigation was carried out, eliminating the possibility that information was unconsciously transmitted by researchers to the family, or that the family found the identified person and then shaped the child's memories to fit. Ian Stevenson, who began this research in 1961, was no fringe figure. He served as chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia and held the Carson Professorship, an endowed chair funded in part by Chester Carson, the inventor of the Xerox process, who had become deeply interested in the question of consciousness and survival. Stevenson spent his career trying to disprove what he was finding. He devoted extensive effort to identifying fraud, to understanding how information might have leaked from one family to another, to accounting for researcher bias in how cases were investigated and reported. In the strongest cases, none of these explanations held. His methodology included specific protocols, documenting statements before verification, conducting interviews with multiple independent witnesses, comparing the child's statements against records the family could not have accessed, and publishing findings in academic journals where they could be reviewed and challenged. His work was reviewed, criticized, and debated in the scientific literature for decades. No one found a methodological flaw that accounted for the strongest cases. When Stevenson died in 2007, Jim Tucker took over the research. Tucker brought additional methodological rigor, including a formal scoring system for evaluating the strength of cases, and has published his findings in mainstream psychiatric journals and in books that have reached wide audiences. He has continued to find the same pattern that Stevenson documented. Children who remember with specific accuracy, who demonstrate emotional and behavioral connections to the life they describe, and whose memories fade predictably as they approach school age. The fading is one of the most scientifically interesting aspects of the phenomenon. If these were fabricated stories or the products of suggestion from adults, there would be no particular reason for them to disappear at a consistent age. The fading seems to follow an internal schedule. Most children who report these memories lose access to them between the ages of 6 and 8. Some, like Swarnlata Mishra, remember far into adulthood. But the typical pattern is a gradual dimming that begins as the child becomes more fully immersed in the new life. Ryan Hammonds himself noted this when he was around 10 years old. His memories of Marty Martin's life were fading. There are alternative explanations that serious researchers have proposed and rigorously examined. The most frequent is that the child absorbed information through normal means, from overheard conversations, books, television, or online sources, and then assembled a narrative around that material without being consciously aware of where it came from. This is a legitimate hypothesis, and it accounts for some cases, particularly weaker ones, where the identified person was locally well known or where information about them was easily accessible. It does not account for the strongest cases. In the Swarnlata case, the statements were documented in writing months before any researcher traveled to Kenya. In the Ryan Hammonds case, the identified person was an obscure extra who never became famous and whose name did not appear in accessible sources. The 55 facts Ryan provided were documented before Marty Martin was identified, specifically to establish that the information preceded the identification. A second alternative is that researchers unconsciously shaped their findings, asking questions in ways that guided children toward accurate answers or discarding incorrect statements in favor of correct ones. Stevenson and Tucker both acknowledged this as a real methodological risk and designed their investigations to address it, including documenting statements independently before investigators interacted with families and using scoring systems that counted inaccurate statements alongside accurate ones. In the Ryan Hammonds case, Tucker's published account notes both what Ryan got right and what he got wrong, because honest research requires acknowledging both. A third alternative, proposed by some researchers, is that certain children might be exhibiting an unusual form of what psychologists call cryptomnesia, the unconscious retention and later expression of forgotten information, perhaps information absorbed before birth through processes not yet understood. But it illustrates that researchers are actively exploring whether explanations exist within current scientific frameworks. The honest assessment, following the evidence rather than a predetermined conclusion in either direction, is this: the strongest cases in the University of Virginia collection are not adequately explained by the alternatives that have been examined. It means the question is genuinely open and that it deserves the kind of serious, sustained investigation that Stevenson and Tucker have given it. The tradition that has offered the most detailed spiritual framework for interpreting cases like these is the Spiritist tradition developed by Allan Kardec in France in the mid-19th century, a tradition that today has its largest following in Brazil, where it is integrated into the culture in ways unique in the world. The Spiritist tradition offers one possible framework for understanding what these children may be experiencing. It does not claim to prove reincarnation scientifically, and the University of Virginia researchers themselves are careful to present their work as an investigation of children who report past life memories, not as definitive evidence of any particular metaphysical conclusion. But the Spiritist framework is notable for how precisely its descriptions align with the patterns the researchers have documented. In the Spiritist understanding, the soul between incarnations exists in a spiritual state. It reviews the experiences of the life just completed and participates in the process of choosing conditions for the next incarnation. The family, the circumstances, the people it will encounter. The soul carries forward what it has become, not as conscious memories in most cases, but as character, as gifts, as the particular quality of a person's inner life that their brief physical years cannot fully explain. But in some cases, the memories do transmit consciously, and the Spiritist tradition offers a specific explanation for why. When a soul experiences a sudden, unexpected transition from one life to the next, the attachment to the previous life can remain unusually close to the surface. The soul enters the new incarnation still carrying strong impressions of what it has just left. The transition did not have time to complete itself naturally. This is why the cases documented by Stevenson and Tucker so disproportionately involve sudden or unexpected deaths. Researchers have noted that many of the strongest cases share this characteristic, though selection effects are always a consideration in this kind of research. What can be said is that sudden transitions appear to create conditions in which the soul's connection to the previous life remains, closer to the surface in the new one, at least for the first few years, before the immersion in the new life completes the transition that was interrupted, and the fading of the memories by age 6 or 7 corresponds precisely to what this framework would predict. The soul is settling fully into the new incarnation. The new life is becoming the primary reality. The previous life is receding not because it is being forgotten in the way we forget ordinary experiences, but because the soul is completing the arrival that began at birth. The memories do not disappear because they were never real. They recede because the transition is now complete. What does it mean if this is real? Not as a theological position to be accepted or rejected, but as a genuine question about the nature of human existence. It means that the children who wake in the night, describing lives they have not lived in bodies, they have not inhabited, are not confused or unwell. They are between two versions of themselves, carrying impressions from one existence into another, and doing so in the only language available to a child, the literal, specific, unfiltered language of direct experience. They do not know they are doing something unusual. They are simply telling the truth as they perceive it. It means that the sudden recognition you sometimes feel for a person you have just met, the specific quality of certain loves that feels deeper than the time you have known each other could account for, the grief that seems too large for a single loss in a single lifetime, these may not be psychological anomalies. They may be echoes of something the soul carried in. It means that what you experience as your strengths and your gifts, the things that seem to come naturally to you in ways your brief years of living cannot fully account for, may be the soul's accumulated inheritance from lives it no longer consciously remembers. The forgetting of past lives does not mean the past lives did not shape you. It presents as character. And it means that the people you love are not exclusively a product of this lifetime's encounters. The soul, in the Spiritist understanding, travels with companions, returns to people it has known before, and continues connections across incarnations that feel to the people inside them like something much older and much more permanent than any single life can explain. James Lininger is now a young adult. He has no particular interest in spending his life being known as the reincarnation case. He has moved on. Ryan Hammond said when he was 10 that his memories had largely faded and that he was ready to just be a kid. Swarnlata Mishra maintained contact with the Pathak family into adulthood, but when she was 25, the specific memories of Bia's life had faded. She went on to complete a graduate degree in botany. This is what the data suggests happens. The previous chapter recedes, and the person moves forward, carrying what was formed before without any longer needing to remember where it came from. Perhaps the purpose of remembering is not to stay trapped in another life. It may be to finish arriving in this one. The cases remain. The documentation remains. The question they raise about what we are and how long we have been becoming, it remains genuinely open. That your soul carries more history than this one life contains feels like something worth exploring. The ebook Reconnecting with Your Divine Essence was written as a companion for exactly this kind of interior inquiry. Not as a set of answers, but as a guide for the deeper encounter with what you actually are, beneath the surface of everything this particular life has shown you. The link is in the description. And the question that this entire body of evidence, carefully gathered across more than 50 years of research on 3 continents, finally arrives at: A 2-year-old in Louisiana woke up, knowing the name of a pilot, the name of a ship, the name of a fellow soldier, and the location of a death that happened before his parents were born. He knew these things the way you know your own name, not as information he had learned, as experience he had lived. What does that tell us about where experience actually goes when a life ends? Maybe it tells us that it does not go nowhere. Maybe it tells us that the love and the memory and the essential person that accumulated across a lifetime are not simply erased when the body stops. Maybe the question is not whether something continues, but how long it takes to remember that it does.